goal of this short video will be to help you figure out what happens in cells during cellular respiration. Have you ever baked fresh bread before? It's actually a simple process in which you combine sugar, yeast, water, and flour together to make a dough. However, baking your bread does take a little bit of time, and that's because after the ingredients have been combined, the dough needs some time to rise. And this is where yeast come in and do their job. Let's take a moment and talk a little bit about yeast. It's something that you might find in your kitchen. So, yeast is a single celled fungus. So, we can see right here, these are what these cells of yeast look like. So, they are one celled organisms, unlike us, who are multicellular. So, yeast actually use the sugar that we put into bread dough as their food source. The yeast also get oxygen from the air around them, and they release another gas, carbon dioxide, as a waste product. And it turns out that this is the carbon dioxide, or the carbon dioxide that the yeast release is actually what causes all of those air pockets in the bread that we eat. So, the carbon dioxide is actually produced through a process called cellular respiration. So let's take a quick look at the chemical reaction for cellular respiration. So think back to sixth grade. Um, we looked at chemical reactions in sixth grade when we were doing chemistry, so some of this should look a little bit familiar to you. So the first thing that the yeast need is something called glucose, which is really just a fancy way of saying sugar. So a glucose molecule has six atoms of carbon, 12 atoms of hydrogen, and 6 atoms of oxygen. The yeast combine the sugar with oxygen that they're getting from the air, and that ends up making some molecules of carbon dioxide. So we've got CO2, makes some molecules of water, and it makes this fancy stuff called ATP, which is just another way of saying energy. The cells of most animals, plants, bacteria, and fungus all go through this chemical reaction of cellular respiration to make energy. So, where does this happen in the cells? We've seen a bunch of cells already. We know that it happens in animal, plant, and fungus cells. And it actually happens in a part of the cell called the mitochondria. So, this is what a mitochondria look like. You're going to find mitochondria in animal, plant cells and fungus cells. It's just a little tiny part that you find in the cell. It's not something that we could see when we look at cells using our microscopes. You need much more powerful microscopes that zoom in a lot more. In bacteria, cellular respiration actually happens in the cytoplasm, which is the liquid part of the cell. So we can see cytoplasm when we look at different types of cells under our microscopes. So bacteria cells, it turns out, are much simpler than animal and plant and fungus cells. And so they don't actually have mitochondria. So that's why the cellular respiration takes place in the cytoplasm. So you might be thinking, well, like, why do cells even need energy? So we need energy in our cells to grow. We need energy to make new cells. So when cells duplicate and replicate themselves to make new cells, that requires energy. Anytime cells need to be repaired because they're old or they're damaged, that's going to take energy. And cells need energy in some cases, to move around. So let's recap cellular respiration and wrap up this video. So cells like yeast and our cells, our blood cells, our skin cells, our bone cells, our nerve cells, all of those cells use oxygen and sugar to make energy, and that's called cellular respiration. And when our cells do that, they release carbon dioxide and water as a waste product. So when we breathe out, we've heard a lot of times, I've heard you guys talk about this, that we breathe out carbon dioxide, but we also breathe out water vapor. So if you've ever gone to like a mirror and kind of breathed into the mirror, like you can see in this picture, it fogs up the mirror, and that's because of the water vapor that's in there.